What should it go?
Artist, let the monsters give you or your band that much-deserved radio airplay. Make your original songs now. Visit facebook.com/indieground. Facebook.com/indieground. The monsters see what you deserve.
Okay, Bruce, when should we start?
So Kyle, I think we have 27 people now, and I think we can go ahead and get started.
All right, that sounds great. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Theme 2 breakout discussions. The idea behind this activity here is to really allow us to talk to each other and to think about the very complex topics that we just heard in the previous two talks. These problems are ones that have a lot of diversity around the world. Anthropogenic processes are different in different places. Natural hazards are different in different places. And so the goal of our session is to really build bridges and help people to communicate about their own experience and interests surrounding the Theme 2 topics, anthropogenic processes and natural hazards, and also technological disasters. So what are we going to do? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to try an experimental collaborative exercise. Well, no, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually give you a little more information and categorize in some way some of the typical anthropogenic processes and typical technological disasters that you might want to talk about during the rest of the session. Then we're going to do an experimental collaborative exercise on Google Maps, where you'll be able to add your own events or anthropogenic processes that have occurred around the world that you are interested in onto a map, and then we'll be able to discuss them. Finally, we're going to break out into two breakout discussions in series. We'll start with a breakout discussion where in small groups, we're going to be given a few guiding questions on a Padlet. And everybody is supposed to introduce themselves quickly in only about 5 minutes. And then the rest of the time in your breakout rooms, you can discuss some of the topics that are presented to you in the Padlets, which is basically using the guiding questions that we talked about previously to motivate your discussion. It's very important that somebody will report information onto the Padlets because we, the panel, will be using that information to feed back to you at the end of the breakout room session and in the final discussion at the end of the day. So I hope that that's a fairly clear picture of what we're going to do. With that, I'd like to just move on and start to talk about some of the examples that are going to motivate our discussion. And Bruce will lead that process starting
Oh, okay, so why don't we just start off with a couple of examples of anthropogenic processes. And what we have here, we just wanted to illustrate a little bit more beyond the talks that you heard in the first hour. And so the first example here is landsliding. This is a photo that I took just shortly before lockdown in December 2019, which seems a long time ago, and this was in India. And in the upper right, we can see an example from India. And we can see examples where vegetation removal, road construction, drainage, building loading have all potentially influenced the intensity and likelihood of landslides. And then on the bottom here, we have a very classic example of groundwater, oil, gas abstraction, subsurface mining, fluid injection, can all influence the intensity and likelihood of earthquakes. And so what you want to be thinking about in our first set of breakouts is going to be what anthropogenic processes might induce natural hazards or which might be induced by natural hazards. And so the work that Joel shows a whole classification scheme, which will be on the Padlet. So I'm going to now hand back over to Kyle to talk about the technological disasters and just give you a couple of examples.
Okay, so Professor Lestari was very kind to have given us a talk with a lot of clear examples of technological disasters that have previously occurred. Interest in this field, I think, has really grown, motivated by a few events such as the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor disaster. So we want to be clear in our discussion here that a technological disaster that is induced by a natural hazard event, this is a NATEC event, could be something like destruction of critical infrastructure due to an earthquake or lightning strike, affecting a power grid, or a hurricane that destroys a refinery and causes chemical emissions, as Professor Lestari previously discussed. There are also other interrelations between technological disasters and natural hazards, in the sense that technological disasters themselves can sometimes create a natural hazard, like the failure of a dam can create a natural hazard, which would be something like a flood or landslide. So what we would like you to do in your discussion on the Padlet is to focus on these processes that relate technological failures to natural hazards. Before we do that, though, we have another slide here. For your reference, let's go over a few further examples. Dam failure resulting in a flood is a technological disaster that induces a natural hazard. Submarine landslides that sever intercontinental communications cables can cause long-term disruption. Ground collapse that causes an explosion. That's another example of a NATEC disaster. So these are examples of the kinds of things that we want you to be thinking about in our further discussion. So before we do that, though, what I'd like to do is have everybody get on board with an experimental exercise where we're going to use Google Maps. There are two URLs at the lower right corner of this. You only need to use the first URL because We have few enough people that we're not going to fill up the map. If you go to this URL, you'll gain access to a Google Maps where you can add your own examples of either anthropogenic processes that have induced natural hazards or NATEC disasters that you are interested in or know about. We have a bit of time to do this. So what I'm going to do is, after I'm done explaining how we're going to do it, I'll give you an example, and then I'll ask people to add their own. And as you add them, we will comment on what we're seeing. So how do you do it? First, navigate to the URL, which is included on the previous slide. Bruce, is that in the chat now? Yep, okay, so it's in the chat as well. What you will find is a series of buttons. Everybody can edit this document. Please use the buttons located to the right of the introductory text to add your own examples onto the map. Once you click a marker on, you can give a name or a title. You can give some text. You can add a picture or a URL if you want. This is a way of calling attention to something that you know or care about. Please do not add a layer to the map using the Add Layer button. We would prefer to keep the map nice and simple. So let me give an example. Here is the Google map. I can see 2 points that have been pre-added. One of them is related to a landslide that severed an oil pipeline in Ecuador at the Cola River. Another one is an example that Professor Lestari mentioned, which was the Palu, Indonesia earthquakes in 2018, where an aqueduct failed basically due to widespread landsliding. So if I wanted to add another one, I might choose one of the most famous NATEC disasters of our time, which would be the Fukushima Daiichi event. So for me to do this, and your things won't appear until I refresh my screen. So if you're adding them and are confused, don't worry. So I might type in Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and it'll take me there. I might want to zoom out a little bit, and then I will just simply add a marker here, and I will call this Fukushima Daiichi. And I might add some text saying a tsunami caused failure of a nuclear reactor. And if I was ambitious, what I might do is search for an image on Google, and you can add an image using either an upload or you can add an image URL, and that will be placed onto your map. So here we go. I'm going to just save, and I have added an example to the map. So I'm going to zoom out, and then I'm going to refresh the map, and I hope that in this time some of the experimentalists amongst us have started adding their own examples. Okay, we do have some examples. These are all the ones that I have previously added. So has anybody thought about where you might add an example of a NATEC incident or a anthropogenic process inducing a natural hazard? Let me look in the chat. Does anybody have an example that they might want me to add? There we go. All right, we're starting to get them in now. I know that it takes a little while to get the new tech rolling. Okay, so we're up to 7. I'm going to just randomly start picking ones that I see here.
So if I just interrupt for a moment, in the chat, you will find a link you can click on, and this will bring you to the web page that Kyle is showing. And in it, then you will click on the, Kyle, if you could just show the little teardrop,
Yes. Okay.
just with the, there. You'll click on that, and that will allow you to add one to any location that you want to. And you drag it to your country. And so I'm just going to also add a couple more.
The goal in this, we're going to move on very soon to some discussion groups. And before we start talking about abstract things in some ways, like what kind of anthropogenic processes might affect natural hazards, it'd be nice to have a few clear examples motivated from the crowd for people to have in mind as they discuss this. So let me go in and find some more examples here. So we have UK, fracking causing earthquakes. So I'm going to click on that. Obviously, hydrofracking or fracking is one of those anthropogenic processes that can directly induce natural hazards, earthquake hazards. If there are other examples of that that people know about around the world or in your area, you could add one of those to a map. Let's see what's down here. We have a point without information. I'm going to refresh my page. All right. So now we're starting to get a lot more points that people are putting in. And when you add information, please make sure you remember to click save so that the information is added to the map. Here's a really good example from Marikina, Philippines. Quarrying and mining activities triggered massive floods. There's a picture of flooded motorbikes. Now, this is one that I was not familiar with. So this is something that I would go and learn about now that somebody has pointed it out to me. If somebody who placed this would want to elaborate more in the chat, that might be something that we could do. Otherwise, when we go to our breakout discussions, these examples are things that you could have in mind. I'm going to go back to France, where we have sinkholes. So immediately a question that jumps to my mind in terms of our discussion is what are the anthropogenic processes that have influenced the hazard and created this hazard of sinkholes? So that's the thought process that we're hoping we're going to go through. Let me click on Nigeria. We have gully erosion and gully-induced landslides. So this is a couple different processes that are occurring. And again, my question is, what are the anthropogenic processes, right, that are leading to this kind of gully erosion? Is it removal of vegetation? Is it a change in groundwater? We're hoping to go through the entire thought process of what kind of human activities can affect and influence hazards. Here I have another one. Rubbish clogs up drainage, causing floods. This is actually a very interesting point because in fact, this is a failure of the technology, right, the drainage system, which has caused a natural hazard. So this is not something that would typically be classified as a NATEC event, which is a natural hazard causing a technological failure. This is the opposite, right? So really good example, I think, and one that we have in Singapore quite often. Let me refresh my page again and see if we have any more coming up. Plenty now. All right, let's go to Kerala. And if anybody else on the panel has something to add in, I know you're all adding your points and things. If you want to comment on anything, that's also fine, just let me know. So in Kerala, we have a dam burst that resulted in flooding. Another good example of a natural hazard event that was caused by technological failure. To me, this raises the question of, well, what caused the dam to burst? Was there something like a heavy rain, a natural disaster that then induced the dam to burst? Or is it a purely technological failure in this case? I don't know. But you might be interested to talk about that in your upcoming discussions. Let me make sure I don't miss anybody. Everybody's doing their work in here. Okay, the 2018 Naga Cebu landslide. Let me find that again. Wonderful. Somebody has uploaded a beautiful photograph of this landslide. Induced by rainfall and quarrying operations. So a classic example of human activities that have set up a hazard that then gets triggered by a natural event. Really nice. Here's an example we have in India of property development, an anthropogenic process for sure, helping to increase the likelihood of landslides. Now, I'm sure that Bruce, if he was going to be leading this discussion, would start asking questions. How is this process affecting the natural hazard? What is it about property development that is leading to this enhanced likelihood of landslides? Bruce, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so I'm actually, I'm co-leading a project in India on early warning of landslides. And a lot of what we're doing in our early warning is looking at weather, we're looking at the geology, but what everyone says is, well, you know, the most important thing that's causing landsliding are the property developments and the laws and the poor drainage. So it's a real question of how we as physical scientists deal with not only the hazard, i.e. the probability of an event occurring based on fundamental mechanisms, but also the exposure, where property is located, the vulnerability of the people. So what are the characteristics of those buildings? What are the characteristics of the laws? And so we see this very intense interplay between anthropogenic processes and human influences and landslides in India. We see this in many places, of course, around the world. I think Sel has a comment in the chat.
Let me find my chat box. Maybe recent landslides in Germany related to heavy rains initially, but also broken dams, poor drainage, and lack of vegetation. Exactly. I think this is a very important point, that this is a complex system. And one of the challenges, I think, is how do you disentangle all of the different causes and effects and processes that can occur. So one of the themes, I think, in this session has been how people can take a systematic approach to classifying things and trying to document the relationships between different types of processes and different types of natural hazards. I think that it's also very important to go back and try to connect the loop backwards. So when you have a technological failure, what kind of natural hazard does that cause? Okay, that's a really, really good point and a good example. Let me refresh. Okay, so it looks like we have a fairly good global distribution. We don't have anything currently from Australia or New Zealand. We have none from North America, only one from South America, which I previously added. Maybe I would ask Fatma Lestari, what would be an example of a NATEC incident in Indonesia that you think is important for other people globally to know about, aside from the ones that you've already mentioned in your lecture? Maybe she has stepped away from the.
So Kyle, it might be time to move to the next part.
Okay. So thanks everybody for taking part in this experimental process. You can continue to add events that you care about or processes that you care about This URL will remain live until the end of the day. So what I'm going to do is move back to our presentation here. And now we're going to move on to our breakout discussions. So Bruce is going to explain the structure of the discussions and how we can get the most out of this interactive session that we've set up.
So thank you. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to use what we've just done, and we're going to use it as a springboard along with the talks to thinking a lot more about anthropogenic processes. And Kyle, if I could do the next slide, please.
Do you have it on the next slide? My chat expanded to be my full screen, so I'm trying to put it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. It's there now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break out. There are 28 of us. I've just seen that 70 people went to climate and 28 people went to anthropogenic processes. So we sort of know where people's priorities are these days, which is climate, anthropogenic processes. And we're going to break out into small rooms. And the idea is that, first of all, you're going to introduce yourselves, very quick introductions, just your name, your institution, 2 to 5 words, just 3 or 4 minutes. And then we're going to go into a Padlet. And the Padlet will be, I'm just going to share a screen actually and show this to you. Actually, that's fine. And in the Padlet, you are going to be asked a number of questions. And you're going to discuss these as a group. So I'm just going to go here, and I will bring the Padlet up for you to see. And so this is a Padlet. We have put the link into the chat. If you don't have the chat, it's tinyurl.com/theme2 Padlet A. Leave your screen on for the moment. And what you'll be doing is there's a link here in case you want to get back. There's instructions. So you need to assign a rapporteur. Kyle, Fatma, and myself will each go in individual rooms. And then we've given you an example here of a anthropogenic process and of a typical hazard cascade where we have storms can trigger floods and storms can trigger landslides. And the first question that we have for you is, could you give 2 examples of anthropogenic processes that might occur at this step 1 that would influence the extent of flooding or landslides here? And the way you'll do it is you'll click on the plus here. This is a Padlet, and in the Padlet, you will write something. And you might say group 1. So decide what group you are, group 1, blah, blah, blah. And you then will put it in and you will publish it. And now you have group 1 and it will appear underneath here. So I'm just going to delete that here. The second question is to think a bit more broadly. What are methods that you're aware of, particularly in your regions, to systematically assess which anthropogenic processes influence flooding and landslides? Or if you want to choose another hazard like space weather, please do so. Do you have examples from your region or research? The third guiding question is, how might we mitigate the human influences that magnify floods and landslide hazards? And so think about your region. It might be, well, property development, or, we need to do the following, but we're interested in actual examples. And finally, what are the challenges of research more broadly that you can think of for anthropogenic processes? And think about knowledge from the global to the regional level, and then any other comments you might have here. And so what we're going to do now, and I'm just going to stop sharing screen, is we're going to move into individual little breakouts. And after 25 minutes, you will be called back to these. And so I'm just going to check here how the breakout rooms have been broken up. We have 1, 2, 3. So we need one more, and I'm just going to create it here before we do anything else. Anthropogenic hazards 4. Kyle, do you think 4 rooms is fine?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And what we'll do, are there any questions before we start? So you're going to go into rooms. You're going to introduce yourselves. You are then going to go to the Padlet, which I will make sure is in each of your chats. And then you'll be working in this Padlet with the people in your room. And we will just go in between each one of these to make sure everyone is happy with that. Any questions on what's going to happen now? And you'll have 25 minutes in total. We wanted you to have time to really engage with this topic. We will come back as a group. We will bring you back, and then we will randomly assign you again. We'll go into technological disasters. We will assign you the rooms. So we're randomly going to put you into rooms now. So if there's no questions, we will go ahead and move you in now. And this looks like it's been done. I'm just checking here. Okay. Hey, Rich, we're just going to be coming back from breakout rooms in a couple of minutes, so I won't assign you to one.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
All right, and then you can join in for the rest of it if you'd like.
Okay, thanks. I just moved over from the other team.
Yeah, more people went to climate. Okay, we'll just wait for everybody to get back from the breakout rooms. And hopefully we won't lose too many people. So we have 8, 10, 11, 12. I'm just prepping now for teaching 14.
My group is quite small.
Yes, that's how they work. So it always takes the numbers and then, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
but we were prolific. We were prolific, though.
Well, it was excellent. I went to all of the rooms. Everyone was, once they got used to the idea of Padlets, was actively getting involved. They were sharing the screen. You were talking, and that's what we kind of wanted out of this conference, was rather than just big talks, to have a lot more engagement of people thinking about different aspects of natural hazards. So I think we're back now. We have 23 people. Everyone is, I'm just checking out of the breakout rooms, and that is great. Now, the question is, Kyle, as you're explaining the next part, do you want me to mix up the rooms, or do you want the same people?
My room was pretty small. I think it would be useful to have another person. Maybe we could do 3 rooms for the next session and mix them up.
Okay, so I'm going to do that now.
Okay, I will show the next Padlet then. Let me share my screen. Okay, so for the next session, thank you everybody for your contributions. I think it's really great to see people's ideas coming out on the Padlet, and we'll talk about this stuff later when we come back to our final session, as well as we have a few minutes after we do these Padlets to discuss. So the next Padlet that we're going to be working on is about technological disasters. And so one of the first things we want you to do is introduce yourself again, because you will be mixed in with a different room of people. And then follow the same process of going through the different questions, A, B, and C, and discussing scenarios of technological disasters that either result from natural hazards, NatHazards disasters, or that produce disasters. And especially we're interested in examples that you're familiar with because of where you live or work, or things that you've read about, like things that you've experienced. So we have that, and then we'd like to talk about mitigation and how we can better take actions to mitigate these kinds of scenarios. And then again, talk about the challenges of the research. That was a pretty interesting discussion that we had in my group about research challenges. I think everybody feels that research challenges are very interesting to talk about. So if that's clear enough, then Bruce, I guess we are probably ready to break out.
Yeah,
Okay,
someone
so
asking about the link. Is it the same link or not?
no, it's another link, and so we need to put that in the chat.
Yep.
I'm just getting it now, everyone, and let me do that now. So you're going to now be on another link. The tiny URL is in the chat, and it's theme 2 Padlet B instead of A. So I've put that into the chat. And if everyone is ready, I'm going to go ahead and now assign you to rooms. We're going to have a slightly shorter amount of time, just 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll reflect on what you've put in for both the Padlets A and B. So I'm going to now go ahead, and I'm not sure. Someone's already clicked on it. All right, so I think people are going in. Yes, good. All right, so I see people are going into the rooms. There's just 3 rooms now. Go ahead and join when it says join, please. Okay, we'll just wait for people to come back from the breakout rooms. And they'll automatically be closed in 30 seconds. Excellent. So we have everyone is now out of the rooms. Good. Kyle, back to you now.
Okay, just a second. I was just finishing typing into the Padlet.
Okay.
Let me share my screen again. So thanks, everybody. I had a really great discussion in my last group, and everybody was really, really contributing a lot of thoughtful ideas. I was very hopeful when we started this process, we'd get this kind of discussion spinning up, and we did. So even with a relatively small group of us, the cream of the crop, we were able to do this. So at this point, we have time. We have about 9 minutes for the panel to reflect on the responses that are in the Padlet. So I'm going to share first Padlet 1. And I'll just ask Bruce, having looked through the Padlet, if you had time, are there any thoughts that you just generally have about what people were saying?
Yeah, I think let me start with one, which is, and I'll probably bring this up in the larger plenary, which is one of the challenges that I'm actually seeing from both the Padlet A and Padlet B that's coming in is where does the expertise come from for people's career paths so that they actually become competent in looking systematically across anthropogenic processes and technological disasters as they relate to natural hazards. And so this is a general comment and one that I think is a big challenge. And we need to think about where is this training coming from? Is it short courses? Is it books? Is it education at university? You know, do we need more grants? Otherwise, what we're doing is we have single case studies, and each one becomes its own case study. I'll leave there.
Yep. I think that's a really important point. And I'm kind of surprised that that has come up. I was thinking we'd be talking more about specific processes, but I think you're absolutely right that that fundamental question is very important. So I'll just go through the panel. So Pak Agung, having taken part in these discussions and looked at the Padlets, what are your thoughts about what people have been saying?
Yeah. Using the Padlet is interesting to communicate between us, to share the idea. Yeah. And yeah, so it can raise idea for the and exchange the idea. Then the important thing that we need is more discussion. Yeah. So then which idea that can be to be followed up, yeah, for the real action.
That's I think that what I see is that this topic and this particular topic of science lends itself to a lot of discussion and a lot of interaction.
Yeah,
it's not a linear topic, right?
Yeah.
So I really do think that your point about the interaction and discussion is really interesting.
And another thing, Kyle, that the group is multidisciplinary. So then we can have another angle of view, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's a really good point. Okay, how about Fatma? Have you, do you have any thoughts on the kinds of discussions that you've been having or the materials that people have been putting on the Padlet?
Can you show Padlet B?
Yes, I can move the Padlet, of course. Yeah,
It's just to the right.
yeah, I have to move my chat box. Padlet B. So okay, so Fatma, do you have any thoughts about what people have put onto this Padlet? If you're responding, you might be muted.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
No problem. I can hear you now. Yes.
So, sorry again. So I missed my signal is sometimes.
Yeah, no problem.
on.
So what we're basically wondering is from the discussions that we've been having and what people have put on the Padlet, do you have any thoughts overall about the kinds of things that we've been talking about, the kind of responses we've been getting?
Yeah, I think it's a very good method to share between each other, and we got plenty of response from different groups and different individuals. So yeah, and we can summarize all the comments here and got the ideas. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that one of the things that I found really interesting about the technological disasters was how people have personal experience with some of these. And sometimes may not have even internalized that this happened to them, that they experienced a technological failure because of a natural hazard. And that just shows how diverse these kinds of problems are. And one other point that I thought was really interesting was looking at very large scale disasters like public health, impacts on public health, pandemics. These kinds of things I think are important to highlight as disasters in and of themselves as well. Yeah. Okay, so Bruce, we have 3 minutes left.
Okay, so can I ask for the next slide in your Mentimeter? Otherwise, I will share my slides. And what we're going to do now is this ends the breakout sessions. And we have two things left for today. One is for the next 30 minutes, there are 25 or 26 display materials in a Padlet. And I'm just going to give you the link to that now in the chat. And if you want to speak to authors individually, you can. And so we're going to go into another Zoom room. There will be a Padlet, but then please, after 30 minutes, thank you very much. After 30 minutes, please come back because we're going to have a 1 hour general Q&A summary of the day and closing of today's session. So what you'll be doing is now going into the Padlet. We'll have 30 minutes each day where you can look at the display material. Many people have uploaded material. It looks very nice. And there'll be 30 minutes for that. Please do comment. And then if you want to speak with an author, they might be here Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. You can try their room to see if they're there. So with that, we'd like to close the session for today. We thank you very much. There's some really engaging chats we've had, some nice things on the Padlets. It was a fun hour and a half that, well, at least for me, moved very quickly. Great. So if people will now move into the next Zoom room and also into the Padlet. So if you click on the Zoom room link, that would be great.
I go straight to the author Zoom room?
Yeah, so go straight to the author's room, but then also go to the Padlet, but go to the author room link. And from there, you will be able to go also to the Padlet. And the Padlet has all of the group display material, which you can look at. And I'll just wait here for people, make sure everyone makes it out of this room. So the bottom link in the chat will bring you to the poster, the group display material area. If you click on the author room Zoom link. And Fatma, we'll see you also for the final 1 hour plenary.
Yes, Aden?
We'll see you for the
In
1
an
hour in 29 minutes. We'll have the final plenary.
Okay. Which link? Is it the same like before?
I'll send it to you via email.
All right. Okay.
Make sure
Thank
you have
so
it.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Should we leave now?
Yeah, if you join the author room Zoom link at the bottom, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you.